So here's how Vox covers it. And now Aaron's here. He's going to correct every wrong thing they have in this article. So their headline is the new Michael Flynn documents aren't the bombshell Trump is making them out to be. So just to tell you the story, after being fired from his position as head of the Defense Intelligence Agency by President Obama in 2014, Flynn cozied up. This is Vox's language. Flynn cozied up to Russia and became one of Trump's more prominent campaign surrogates. Do you know what they mean when they say he cozied up to Russia? Was that at that dinner that Jill Stein was at? Is that what they mean by that?
Yes, that literally means that he went to a gala to celebrate RT's anniversary. And so that means that he cozied up to Russia. And, and Flynn talked about cooperation with Russia, which I guess when you're a McCarthyite neoliberal, as is kind of a job requirement at Vox, you think that's cozying up to Russia.
Okay. So again, this is when they say cozy up to Russia, that's McCarthy bullshit that Vox is doing, that most of journalists do nowadays.
It's pretty popular. It's
pretty popular.
Yeah.
The next paragraph says Flynn planted the seeds of his own undoing before he even started the job by having secretive communications with Russian officials during the transition period. Now that's also, you tell me, Aaron, is that correct?
Well, what he did was he had a phone call with the Russian ambassador to the U.S., which normally would be totally fine. I mean, during a transition, incoming officials speak to foreign officials all the time. And if you look at the actual contents of his call, which there is a transcript of because it was wiretapped, and the only reason we know about it is because the fact of the call, not the transcript, but some aspects of it were leaked to the public. You'll see that there was nothing wrong, except for actually one thing. The one thing that was wrong never gets discussed by places like Vox. Flynn was talking to the Russian ambassador for a couple of reasons. The one reason that gets talked about a lot is the reason that where basically Flynn told Kislyak that in response to new sanctions that Obama was imposing on Russia on his way out the door, Flynn said to Kislyak, listen, all we ask is you consider not responding in a way that escalates the situation because we're going to be coming in soon anyway. And the Trump team saw those sanctions that Obama imposed on his way out as a way to sort of help delegitimize Trump's victory because those sanctions were purportedly in response to Russia's alleged election meddling. So Flynn just said, whatever you do, we ask you not to escalate the situation. So, and if you respond proportionally. That's what Flynn said. Now, what he also said, and that gets no attention, is that Flynn also asked the Russian ambassador to veto a UN Security Council resolution that Obama was going to let pass for pretty much the first time. And it was a resolution being critical of Israel for its settlement building in the occupied territories. And what happened was, and this is the only documented collusion with a foreign government that we can find when it comes to the Trump team, the Israeli government and Sheldon Adelson asked the Trump team for their help in killing that resolution. And the Trump team, in collusion with Israel, tried their best to do that. And so Flynn was calling Kislyak to achieve that goal of having Russia veto that resolution. But Russia said no, and the resolution passed. But that's the documented collusion with a foreign power, and it never gets discussed because basically support for Israel and its government is bipartisan, except for that one instance where Obama let that one vote pass. And also that whole story undercuts the narrative of collusion between Trump and Russia, because we're supposed to believe that Trump and Russia were really in cahoots, not Trump and Israel.
So actually, the person that Flynn was actually working in collusion with and for was Israel.
That's right.
Not on the behalf of Russia, of Israel. And so, these kind of conversations that General Flynn had with Kislyak, which is the Russian ambassador, are normal. Those happen in transitions from one administration to another all the time. Is that what you're saying?
those conversations have happened all the time. The one thing that is not normal, I think it's pretty normal to say, hey, listen, whatever you do, don't escalate the situation. That's what he said when it came to the issue of new sanctions on Russia. What is not normal is him saying, hey, would you mind vetoing this resolution at the United Nations for us? I mean, that to me is worthy of criticism. I'm not sure if it's illegal. I mean, there is something called the Logan Act,
right?
But it hasn't been used. It hasn't been used since literally the 19th century. So it's totally arcane.
So we're going to talk about the Logan Act coming up. So here's the next paragraph from the Vox article. It says, at issue are newly released documents detailing how the FBI officials handled a key January 24, 2017 interview with Flynn, who at the time had just started his brief, ill-fated tenure at Trump's national security advisor. And just to let you know, they had investigated him already, Flynn, and the FBI hadn't found anything. And so it was Strzok who wanted them to keep this investigation open. The guy who was caught on his text saying, I'm gonna stop Trump from being president. That FBI guy. Okay.
Jim, this is a critical thing to stress here because what's amazing is that the FBI shouldn't have been investigating Flynn to begin with. They had no reason to. But even though they were investigating him and obviously found nothing because they were looking into Russian collusion, there was nothing there. Even when they found nothing, Strzok intervenes to get them to keep the case open. And that just raises the question of why. There's a whole bunch of speculation. I have a few theories. But it's crazy to begin with that they're investigating Flynn. And once they conclude that there's nothing there with collusion, which was the obvious answer, Strzok intervenes to keep that case alive, which then leads to Flynn's troubles. And just to stress how dumb it was that Flynn was being investigated to begin with, I mean, you have to go back a couple of months. So with the IG report you mentioned, the Horowitz report, we learned definitively how the Trump-Russia investigation began. And it was because this low-level volunteer, George Papadopoulos, said something to an Australian diplomat about Russia maybe having something that could help Trump and hurt Hillary. And with the Horowitz report, we learned exactly what that tip from the Australian diplomat was. And let me read it because it's so stupid. And what makes it even more dumb is that they take that tip and somehow bring it to other people like Michael Flynn and Carter Page. So according to the FBI, the foreign government official from Australia said that Papadopoulos, quote, suggested the Trump team had received some kind of suggestion from Russia that it could assist this process with the anonymous release of information during the campaign that would be damaging to Mrs. Clinton and President Obama. It was unclear whether Papadopoulos or the Russians were referring to material acquired publicly or through other means. It was also unclear how Trump's team reacted to the offer. So look at that little passage there. First of all, the tip that the FBI gets is not that the Papadopoulos was told about stolen emails. It was only that Papadopoulos suggested the Trump team had received some kind of suggestion from Russia that it could assist this process. So it's totally vague, it's totally ambiguous, and they say it's unclear what the Russians were referring to. So on that basis of this low-level Trump volunteer saying he overheard something, they open up a counterintelligence investigation of a presidential campaign. And how do they get to Flynn? They don't get to Flynn with any concrete information. All they do is they go, okay, all right, so if the Trump team got some kind of suggestion, some kind of offer, maybe, then who else on the Trump team might be receptive to it? Well, there's Carter Page, who worked with the CIA before and helped us actually indict some Russian spies. There's Paul Manafort, who has some ties to Russia because of his work in Ukraine. And there's Michael Flynn, because Michael Flynn went to an RT gala. And literally, that was the basis for opening up separate counterintelligence investigations of all these different individuals. And that's why months later, when they get to early January, they're like, they realize they don't have anything for Flynn. They decide to close that investigation until Strzok intervenes.
So they had pretty much the FBI was going to shut down their investigation of General Flynn to begin with. That guy Strzok, who we caught already, saying he was going to. And by the way, Strzok was caught lying to the FBI himself many times, and of course, he never got prosecuted. But anyway, so Strzok keeps this investigation open, and we don't know why. But we're going to keep moving forward. FBI leadership was already aware at the time that Flynn had phone calls with then Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak during the presidential transition period. In those calls, Flynn advised Kislyak not to respond to, this is what you just explained, not to respond to new sanctions the Obama administration placed on Russia for interfering in the just completed presidential election. Intercepts of Flynn's conversation with Kislyak raised concerns with the FBI that Flynn had violated the Logan Act, a law that prohibits unauthorized citizens from negotiating with foreign governments. Now, let me tell you what the Logan. So where did that idea come from? It came from Strzok. So Peter Strzok, the FBI is going to close down their investigation. He says, wait a minute, there's this thing called the Logan Act that nobody ever fucking heard of, and it hasn't even been used since before the Civil War. He goes, I got this thing, we got him. So they go, okay, so that's what the Logan Act is. And so they're going to try and get him on a thing that's never been used since before the Civil War. And what he was basically doing was just normal stuff anyway. And if he did intervene, it wasn't on behalf of Russia or Trump. It was on behalf of Israel. Okay. The newly unsealed documents, which is why we're talking about this, which were released by Flynn's lawyer on Wednesday and are the first fruits of Attorney General William Barr's investigation of the Flynn investigation, indicate that FBI officials debated how to question Flynn about his contacts with Russia and whether their aim was to get him to admit any wrongdoing. So just so you know, there was the Russiagate investigation by the FBI and the intelligence community, and now there was the Inspector General's investigation of the investigation, and now William Barr is investigating the investigation, which they all should be doing, by the way. I encourage this. So in one handwritten note that Trump and his backers in Congress and on Fox News are trumpeting as a bombshell, Bill Priestap, then the FBI's head of counterintelligence, wrote the following. What's our goal? Meaning when they go to meet with Flynn, what's our goal? Truth, admission, or to get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired. If we get him to admit to breaking the Logan Act, give facts to the Department of Justice and have them decide. Or if he initially lies, then we present him and he admits it. Document for Department of Justice and let them decide how to address it. Now, what do you make of this, Aaron, when they say, what's our goal in our meeting with Flynn? Do we want truth or do we want him to admit to a lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired? Is that significant?
Well, it's unprecedented. There has to be some sort of ulterior motive here because, first of all, they don't even need the truth. They have the transcript of the call between Flynn and Kislyak. So they know exactly what happened. So there's actually no information to obtain from Flynn here. There only can be some sort of ulterior motive to catch him in a perjury trap or to get him to admit to a violation of the Logan Act, I guess, which, as you say, it's never been used to convict an American. It's an arcane law. So for some reason, they want to get him. I can speculate as to why, but basically it's totally dirty, but yet this ends up becoming a huge plank of the multi-year Trump-Russia conspiracy because the fact that they then accuse Flynn of lying is then used by Russiagate propagandists to say that Flynn was covering up some sort of illicit quid pro quo between Trump and Russia, and it's all fantasy. It's all based on basically some incredibly cynical malfeasance on the part of the FBI here.
So Vox then says this. This is Vox's reporting on this. I'm not making this up. They say none of this may seem like a big deal. It seems like a big deal to me. Does it seem like a big deal to you, award-winning reporter on Russiagate?
It does seem like a big deal if you're trying to ambush a national security advisor and you're keeping a case alive when you know there's nothing there. It does seem like a big deal. It shouldn't seem like a big deal to, I guess, someone who wants to stay in this fantasy that the Russia investigation was legitimate. I mean, which is kind of Vox's modus operandi. They promoted the the Trump-Russia conspiracy theory for 3 years. So, and this is just an example of not being able to come to grips with documents that are right in front, even like the FBI writing down, let's try to, basically, in essence, let's try to entrap this guy.
And so what Vox is doing here is trying to diminish the importance of this, just like everyone did before with the Inspector General revealing that they lied to the FISA court repeatedly, and they lied about Carter Page, and they all downplayed that. James Comey tried to take a victory lap after that was revealed. And now they're doing the same thing. And here Vox is lying to their own readers about what's happening. They're saying this isn't a big deal. Well, obviously this is a big deal. This whole investigation was a sham. Strzok was obviously revealed for inserting his personal political beliefs into his investigation. He was been exposed for that. That guy has been exposed for lying to the FBI himself. And he never got prosecuted for it. He had more significant lies than Flynn did, and they didn't prosecute Strzok. Okay, so let me just go. Let me just read the rest of this. It says, none of this may seem like a big deal, but to Trump world, it's evidence that Flynn was set up by dirty cops who were already resolved at the early date to bring Trump down. That's exactly what this is, right? And they're saying that that's crazy. So what are you going to do? Believe your eyes and ears? Or are you going to believe Vox? Is this kind of like, this is what I'm talking about, journalism. This is everywhere. NBC does this, Vox does this, the New York Times does this, the Washington Post does this. Every place, BuzzFeed, Daily Beast, every place does exactly what Vox is doing, which is on purpose lying to their own readers to mislead them to do propaganda against Donald Trump.